And we're coming to you live for the Built Ford Tough Studio. Boomer Esiason and Gregg Giannotti. It's Boomer and Gio on the Fan. Simulcast across the country on CBS Sports Network. And wherever you are in the free Odyssey app, good Wednesday morning. This is the last night without significant football for the next several days, all the way through Monday night, because you got the college football playoffs, Thursday night, Friday night, and then, of course, super wild card weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. I am all jacked up for this. Of course, it ends with a game that my team is playing in. We'll have a lot of football prior to that, and we hope that the Jets next year maybe will get close enough to break that streak, the playoff-less streak that they have had as they're trying to find their new GM and their new head coach. And yesterday it got a little bit more complicated for them because they were the only team that had a GM opening. They were the only team until the Tennessee Titans decided, we got the number one pick, and I don't trust the GM. Rand Carthon, he's gone, so now they're looking for a GM. And if you're a general manager candidate, you got the number one overall pick. That's an exciting thing for you. And also another firing, Antonio Pierce, officially gone. Does that change the Mike Vrabel Patriots thing because Tom Brady's out there in L.A.? Good morning, Boomer. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, G. So much news around the NFL, as there always is this time of year. And I think you hit on something that I was going to open with, and that is whether or not Tom Brady can outbid Mike Vrabel if, in fact, the Raiders want to interview Mike Vrabel. Here's the thing about the Patriots, folks. They have already complied through the protocol of the Rooney Rule. They've interviewed two black head coaches, potential head coaches. That would be Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton. And I don't know if they're sham interviews. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. You and I always talk about if you get an opportunity to interview, if you're one of these guys, you got to take it because you got to go through the experience because that will help you in your next interview process. And that's exactly what happened to my buddy, Frank Reich, who's white. Mm-hmm. So these things happen all the time, but the Rooney Rule's out there. And immediately the Patriots got two guys in there that happened to be minorities, and they gave their interviews. And now Mike Vrabel, I think, is going in tomorrow. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have a deal already set in stone that they won't let him leave the building. They don't have to let him leave the building. They could just offer him, some crazy 5-year, $40 million deal or something like that, and he'll take it and he'll be happy with it. But nonetheless, there is a Tom Brady potential fly in the ointment scenario here because obviously he is a part owner of the Raiders. As you said, they fired Antonio Pierce. That's not surprising to me. And I think a lot of that had to do with in-game management and some of the press conferences. These owners want their coaches to stand up there in front of their fan base, and they want them to be somewhat of a political CEO type. And, there are guys that, we look forward to their press conferences. Mike Tomlin comes to mind. Andy Reid comes to mind. Kyle Shanahan comes to mind. Not everybody can do it like they do it. So I think these guys are learning, and maybe they'll get a second chance or a second or third chance in some cases later on down the line. But, man, it is fast and furious what's happening in the NFL.
Yeah, and it's just another job that I think is more attractive than the Jets, and we expected it. So it's not like it was a surprise. It just took longer than some of these other jobs because there was a lot of in-season firings and then things that happened on Sunday we found out about Gerard Mayo. So there's a lot of things that already happened, and this took all the way till Tuesday to happen with Antonio Pierce. But that job, I think, is more attractive, even though Mark Davis is a little bit quirky and odd, and that organization has sort of reflected that since he's been in charge. It still seems like a better place, especially with that stadium and the new fan base and everything that's going on.
It's a tough
out
place.
There.
It's a tough place to coach, and the reason it's a tough place to coach is because it's Vegas.
Yeah,
and they've had problems there with players off the field, and it is a huge problem, for the coaches there to keep everybody focused. The other thing that happened yesterday. Talk about players focused. I mean, Mike McDaniel's press conference for the Dolphins. Did you see this?
With Chris Greer, yeah. When they're sitting next to each other, yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. You're celebrated when you do things quirky and you do things different and you look quirky and you're a little bit off. It's kind of funny when you're winning. When you're not winning and you start talking about players who are late for meetings and you're really specific about the problems that you have internally, I'm like, Jesus God. And Miami's another one of those places where, off the field, it has a big impact of what's going on the field.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely, and it's always been that way. But yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a CEO type as a head coach. We know that Mike McDaniel isn't that, and when they were riding high and Tua was playing great, I mean, he was the toast of the town, and now he looks like a guy who doesn't know what he's doing. When Tua was hurt and they had a bad season, and Tyreek Hill is going rogue, and apparently they mended their fences. But, I mean, if you're a head coach that is in full control of your organization, you don't have your star wide receiver as soon as the season ends say, I'm out. You know, it's been fun playing here, but
I think
he's
been part of the problem. I bet you he's been part of the problem. And here's the other thing. You know, he's got 5 new kids this year or something? Some remarkable number.
I'm not. I lost count.
Just say this. He's looking for a contract extension is what he's looking for because he's going to need the money.
They just get paid?
Yeah, but he's got like 2 years left on like a 5-year deal I think he had. And when guys start complaining like this and they want to get traded and all this other crap, the Dolphins are going to have a problem on their hand. Regardless of mending fences today, he'll change his mind tomorrow.
Yeah, probably.
And as good as a player, I mean, honestly, I'm just talking about the player on the field. He's a dynamic player on the field. He changes everything. And every coach in the league would love to have him on their team. But after 2 years, they're going to get sick of him. You know, he's just going to drive everybody crazy. He's going to be late to meetings. He's not going to say the right things in the
driving
media.
100 miles an hour to the stadium.
There's so many crazy things around him.
Right.
And I believe he probably wants a contract extension. But on the field, there is no doubt, or looking at the way that he plays, that he changes the entire landscape of the opposing defense. So he's a great player, but man, he could be a headache. And that regardless of burying the hatchet or we're all on the same page, I mean, there's no way with what Mike McDaniel was saying yesterday that you can actually look at him and say, you got control of your football team. You don't. You don't have control of your football team. And that shows you that kind of coaching, that kind of caressing, what do you like to call it? You call
coddle guy.
Coddle guy. You could coddle so much if you have the right guys to coddle, but they're taking advantage of him.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about the guys that Kevin O'Connell has caught, Kevin O'Connell, what he's done out there is, with Sam Darnold who needed coddling, a Kirk Cousins, and then Justin Jefferson is just a great player, a great guy, wants to win, really has never spoke up, has never been a problem at all, like really appreciates where he is in the NFL. So he's, at least up until this point, has not complained, even when they had quarterback issues last year and he wasn't getting the ball as much and he got hurt. He wasn't complaining.
I asked Phil Simms this.
We'll have Phil on today at 8 a.m., by the way.
Will, and I forget I think he said that maybe once or twice he might have been late to a meeting. I remember I was only late to a meeting once in my life, and that was because of a car accident, going to Cincinnati from Kentucky on the Brent Spence Bridge. And there was nothing you could do, and there were no cell phones. I had this pit in my stomach.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's like I knew that I was late. I knew that everybody else knew that I was late, and there was nowhere to go. And there were no cell phones. Mm-hmm. So everybody, there's obviously got all points bulletin out for me. They're looking for me. I had left like at 7 a.m. in the morning. We had a meeting at 8. I had a 15-minute drive, and I showed up at 8:20.
Yeah.
And of course, I walked in, and Sam had held the team meeting until I got there. And I walk in, and then, everybody's like, "Woo!" And you just feel like crap because you're late. But it sounds to me like this generation of football players, not all of them, maybe just a select few on each team, just basically don't understand the responsibility of being a grown-ass man. Like we like to use those words, grown-ass man.
Sure.
Grown-ass man means you got responsibilities. You got to show up on time. You got to be accountable, and you got to be a leader.
I still think there's more of those guys than not.
No, I'm saying there is.
Yeah.
But all it takes is like 2 or 3 guys on a habitual basis that undercut what the coach is doing. So if you have, say, 65 guys on your roster, and you have 2 or 3 guys that are completely coming in late or always coming in late, and all you can do is find them, and there's really no repercussions, especially if they're an important player for your team, what does that do to the coach's credibility, his respect, all the things that we talk about, the words that we talk about every team has to have? You have to be unselfish. You got to be committed. You got to be respectful. You got to be disciplined. You got to be consistent. Those words should not ring hollow when it comes to a football team, whether it's a high school football team, a college football team, or a professional football team. Everybody's got to be on the same page. And I don't want to hear any BS excuses about why you're late. If you have a legitimate reason why you're late, it's once a season. Maybe there's something you have at home that happens that, is out of your control, or something that, is bigger than football. That's a different story. But if you're just like hanging out on a Tuesday night and you get in at 1:00 and you show up at 9:00 as opposed to 7:30, that's BS.
Yeah, and these are some of the reasons why we keep talking about that personality and that game changer and that guy that commands respect with the Jets walking into that building, and you know that he is in charge. Now, I don't love the way that this Jets coaching search has gone so far, but I will give you one big positive.
All right.
So far, one big positive.
One big positive.
Something that feels different already.
The Jet Nation needs something to give them something to chew on, to be positive.
Well, it's not that big of a deal, but it is a positive thing.
All right.
So far, no leaks.
Okay.
You're not hearing anything. Like generally, in this past season, a lot of leaks, a lot of stuff in the Athletic, a lot of this, a lot of that. I mean, it feels like they took this operation down to Florida, and they've got this thing completely under wraps.
Oh, it's locked up, man.
And you haven't heard how the Rex thing went. You haven't heard how the Vrabel thing went. Like, they are really tight-lipped with this, with so many candidates out there, and also having hired the 33rd team. So
I'm wondering if they've, with their interviews, if they sat down with these guys and said, look, here's your NDA. You cannot say anything. Your agent cannot say anything. And if we hear something, we're just going to take you off the list.
I mean, and you say, oh, why is that a positive? That's a positive because it feels like they've learned something, and trying not to step in it and trying not to make things worse than they already are. And saying, all right, we got to make sure that we're handling this like professionals, and there's not all these reports and there's Diana Rossini things that are all over the place. We got to make sure that this thing is done differently. So far, so good.
I just don't understand one thing. I mean, like, I would hope your GM would be involved in these. You got to make sure that two people can work together, that there's some sort of similarity in the way of thinking about the game of football.
Yeah, I thought about this too, because I've always said, and in lockstep with you, that the GM, you hire the GM hires the coach. However, it's kind of hypocritical of me to say that when I've continued to say that the alpha male has to be the head coach. So in this instance, to me, it's not that crazy to go the other way and be like, get the head coach, get the CEO head coach, and then find the GM that can work with that guy, because in this instance, that head coach and that dude is more important than anybody.
Another more speculation on my part, but I would say that, if it is Phil Savage as the GM, which I wouldn't have a problem with, by the way, Rex Ryan has a really good chance, because I know that they have a relationship.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that relationship, has transpired over the years, but I would think that even though he has not been interviewed, I don't necessarily know that he has to be interviewed, because he's been on the Jet staff, as a consultant, and has been around the team and knows the inner workings of the team and knows everybody involved, knows the roster, knows what they need or what they feel like they need in order to improve the team and make the team better. And it'd be interesting to see whether or not, Rex Ryan, if it is Phil Savage, says, I could play with Aaron Rodgers. Just as long as Aaron Rodgers follows my rules and knows what I want, then I'm good with it. And, Rex would be the alpha male. And I think that if Aaron ended up staying here, I think that would be good for Aaron. I think Rex would be great for Aaron, honestly, because it would take so much pressure off for him having to be like the center of attention of everything because of who he is, what he's accomplished somewhere else. And Rex could come in and just be the bombastic Rex Ryan that will handle the press, handle the media, handle the fan base, and probably build a really aggressive defense and tell Aaron Rodgers, this is what we're doing and this is what I need you to do. And if Aaron Rodgers took less money to do that,
who's going to be running the offense? That's really the question.
That will be,
because that's got to be someone Aaron's getting along with.
Yeah, no, and again, like, you don't want to change an old dog because you can't teach him too many new tricks at his age. And I think we saw that over this past year. Press coverage means I'm throwing back shoulder throws to my wide receivers, and in every crunch time situation, it felt like that's exactly what he did. Anytime there was press coverage, he was either looking for 5 or 17. Most thought it'll be 17 because they have a special report doing that. But opposing defenses knew that. So what do? They do the press coverage and they tell their cornerback, look, this is what's going to happen. Now it's up to you to make a play.
Yeah, and I know that that's always going to be a talking point, Aaron Rodgers, but I'm not so concerned yet about next year's team and who the quarterback is going to be, because this hire at head coach is it's not only about next year. I mean, it's about cleaning this thing up and building a foundation finally where they could have some sort of sustained success.
I'm telling you, if they walked Rex Ryan or John Gruden in that building, or Mike Vrabel for that matter, which I doubt's going to happen. But if it were Rex Ryan, he walked in the building, the players would be jacked up. He would just make them so excited. And I'm sure that there would be a lot of ex-players that would be hanging around that played for Rex that would help and be a part of, rebuilding whatever Rex had here when he was successful. I don't want to discount the legitimacy of his interview. I just don't. I don't know how it went. If he walked in there and said, this is my staff, this is how I'm going to do things, I bleed jet green, this is what we think we can do. If you want to keep Aaron Rodgers, I can work with him, but he's going to have to work under, what I need to do. To me, it's like you got to have a coach like that. But the other thing, too, is remember, he is a coach who really hasn't had a quarterback. Mark Sanchez was good under him, but I think he stunted Mark Sanchez's chance for any sort of growth anywhere. Because I remember a game down in Baltimore where Sanchez got his ass kicked. And then after that game, all Rex could talk about was ground and pound. Like the next game, I would have had Mark Sanchez throwing 60 passes. And if you throw 5 interceptions, so be it. But you're going to learn how to pass in this league, and you're going to be a reason why we win. But he won protecting Mark Sanchez. And he wouldn't need to do that in the way that I'm speaking about with Aaron Rodgers if he decided to keep him. And I bet you that any sort of veteran coach knows the most important position on his team, I need that quarterback to have a chance to win. And if Aaron Rodgers is not in the mix, then who is?
Yeah, this process is going to take a long time because there's still a ton of guys that are on that list that the Jets have not interviewed yet. So
really?
I mean,
it feels like they've interviewed just about everybody.
No. They've requested. They haven't interviewed them.
Oh, I see.
So if you look on the CBS Sports Network graphic that they had up with the head coaches, in red they have the ones that they actually interviewed, and then the rest of them they have these. Here you go.
Oh,
look at this.
Oh my God, Jesus! You know what I don't see on there?
John Gruden.
I don't see John Gruden or Ben Johnson.
I know. Well,
why interview somebody if you know they're not coming?
Right. But it is funny that they've requested everybody but the consensus number one next great offensive mind. I know he's not going to come here, and I know it's not a fit, but it just is funny that they're dusting off every single candidate except John Gruden, who I think would be perfect, and Ben Johnson, who is a guy that, I mean, at least get him in there and pick his brain for the hell of it.
Yeah, you would think so, but I also know that a very interesting thing's going on in Dallas right now with Mike McCarthy. So the Bears requested an interview with Mike McCarthy of the Cowboys, whose contract runs out on January 14th. And the Cowboys denied the request for an interview.
Yeah.
So January 14th, he becomes a free agent, and he can then interview on January 14th.
Yeah, so it makes me think that they're working on a contract extension right now.
Are they?
I would think so. I mean, if they aren't, that's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, blocking him from another chance at a job and then retaining him to the point where he can't go coach another team.
It would really suck if they didn't give him a new contract extension and then say the Bears never got a chance to interview him because they decided to go with somebody else, although I don't think that will happen.
They can't do that. That's bad.
Because
that's bad.
What are we, we're at January 8th right now?
He's going to get a contract extension. They're working on that now. They have to. Jerry Jones is not that diabolical, and he likes Mike McCarthy. So I think Mike McCarthy's going to come back as the Cowboys head coach. All right, Boomer and Gio on the Fan and CBS Sports Network. Just getting started. We'll get Jerry in here in a couple minutes.